Now, for today, we are delighted to have Henry Whitfield, and he's going to be talking about psychedelics and acceptance and commitment therapy and their ethical and moral use in therapy and to help people. Henry is, really at the cutting edge and forefront of this. He's been running psilocybin retreats, and he's involved in research with Regent's University in London in this area of psychedelic use for psychotherapy. So he's also a peer-reviewed trainer and internationally renowned. So it's really exciting to have him here, and it's his expertise are going to be fantastic. But without further ado, I'll hand over to you, Henry. I'm really looking forward to this session.
Thank you so much, Louise, for inviting me and introducing me. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here to get to share a little of what I've been exploring, because I've been researching this now for getting to probably towards 5 years. I'm doing a PhD now at Maastricht. Right now I'm in Maastricht in the lab, psychopharmacology lab, where there's all kinds of studies into every kind of psychedelic substance you can imagine. We just had a research day here yesterday. Do a super brief little hexaflex meditation if you're willing. And then we can you don't necessarily need to look at this hexaflex. The bits that I have written in blue, you see slow down, allow it. These are ways of turning these little concepts into behavioral instructions, or some of them are more like questions, but I do think it's useful if we can look at things often in terms of very simple instructions. So let's just have a little experience of moving around this hexaflex. So if you're willing, you may wish to close your eyes, find a comfortable position in which you won't need to fidget. Let's find a dignified posture, maybe a straight spine, so you're not slouching in one way or the other. Just slow down. You want to close your eyes, or you can fix your eyes on a spot. Maybe your mind has been racing, trying to understand all the things I'm saying. But just for a couple of moments, how about we slow down and we just feel into our bodies. Notice the direct experience of the chair beneath you. Notice that that's not so much about thought, something that you're just directly feeling moment to moment. Notice the feeling of the air against your skin. And as you feel into your body, just scan through your body and see if you can find any sensation that stands out. It could just be the feeling of the chair beneath you. Whether it's a pleasant sensation or a not so pleasant sensation. But ideally, if you do have some kind of not so pleasant sensation, just allow yourself to notice that. Notice if there's any defense, if there's any part of you that is commenting on or querying or not completely open to that sensation. Perhaps just for a moment, just ask yourself or feel into yourself and see how open you can be to experiencing that sensation without defense. And as you do that, notice what your mind is doing. Does your mind have anything to say about what we're doing? Whatever your mind is doing, just notice it. Notice that you may be having thoughts, and that those thoughts, whatever they may be, are just thoughts. And as you notice those thoughts, I invite you to just zoom out very slightly. Notice that you're probably sitting in a particular posture. You're probably in a bit of a roll right now. Maybe you're in the role of being a learner, being a student, being a professional, of some kind, whatever that posture or role that you notice that you're in. Yeah, I notice I'm in the role of a teacher. I notice what may be driving that role. Maybe I want to be clear as I communicate. Whatever it is, notice you're noticing that. Notice that it is a role. Notice that it doesn't ultimately define you to your core. It's just something you're doing right now. As you notice whatever posture you're in, whatever role you may be aware of having right now, notice that you're here. You made time to come to this workshop. You probably had to give up doing other things in this moment. You probably had to plan it. So notice that you took those steps. You did something. You chose to engage in this process, and here you are. And as you notice that you made steps, you took steps to be here, notice what it is that may have guided you in making that decision. Notice what it was that brought you here. Perhaps you had some kind of hope, or there may have been something there too. Perhaps you wanted to learn, perhaps you were curious. Whatever that was, could be anything, all kinds of things that I couldn't guess. Whatever that was or is, just notice. And as you're present to what's important to you, what may have inspired you to choose to actually take this time to be here, again, I invite you to just notice the feeling of the chair beneath you. Notice that beyond thinking and thoughts, there is a sensory experience. Notice the feeling of the air against your skin. And when you're ready, if you didn't already, open your eyes. How are people doing? Cool. Thanks for the thumbs up, Jim. Um, that's just a little, so it's six, those of you who are quite new to this, six is it's a kind of, because the ACT model is, another thing I love about it is it's evolving. This is considered a fairly old now. There's new ways of applying these principles, but I think a lot of these principles are still fairly intact, just applied in different ways, more and more flexible ways. And so, yeah, there are these six processes, and now we're going to look at how they may relate to psychedelic phenomenology. Well, maybe one last thing is the self as context. So this is a kind of fairly confusing term if you're new to it. This means it's a bit like a non-self self, or what's there that isn't the identified, cognitive, conceptualized self, the witness. In many traditions, you may have there's many traditions that have something a bit like this. But some kind of witnessing part of you that experiences the ideas about who you are. And this is the process that is often neglected in, if you look at a lot of ACT therapy videos, you probably nearly always see all the other ones, but the self stuff won't be as commonly applied, in my view. So the spectrum of selves is also a way of addressing that issue, if I can call it an issue, or just trying things out in a different way. So there's a lot more emphasis on the self. So this is kind of a brief summary of some of what's in the paper. So if you look through the psychedelic literature, there's a lot of discussion about the self, the sense of self. You hear about things such as ego dissolution, which is quite a rather intense experience, which can often feel even like you're dying, like you will be no more, can be very confronting. And another reason why I like to emphasize the importance of the self is I do believe that in the deeper therapeutic transformations, it's very likely the person will feel like you have a kind of new self, or if you're living your life with new values, um, you're relating to your thoughts about who you are differently, and you've done quite deep work on that, then yeah, I think it's useful, even helpful to think, well, maybe I'm developing a new self story, a new way of interacting with the world. So yeah, people talk about a multiplicity of selves, this parts work. Some of you may be familiar with internal family systems. Um, so this approach very much integrates internal family systems, such as having a child part of you. Something similar that we do with that in classic ACT is ask how old a certain thought is. Because often a thought such as I'm not good enough, one of the most classic thoughts, that unhelpful thoughts that we humans have, it can have a very long history, and just realizing how long that history is can be helpful for reframing how you relate to that thought. Um, so yeah, trauma also very much comes up. There are measures that look at, yeah, this is one of the believe, yeah, the emotional breakthrough inventory, which is quite a well-established measure now, I guess, in the psychedelic world, which has the item, I experienced a resolution of personal conflict or trauma. So yeah, traumatic memories, again, as we loosen the defenses, we human beings have a lot of defenses to not feel certain things. And psychedelics help loosen that, which is similar to increasing willingness to be present to what's really there, what may even lie beneath the threshold of our awareness, as we open ourselves more and more. So, so this is a way of kind of redesigning these ACT processes. If you remember the hexaflex, the 6 processes, we can actually plot them across all these different types of self. So yeah, again, those of you who are quite new to ACT, the selfing processes, selfing experiences are often usually grouped into 3 phases. Self as content being you believe you are this conceptualized story, so it's less flexible. So this is very much about psychological flexibility as well. So in a way, as you move up this continuum, think of this as a continuum. As you move up that continuum, you are more flexible. There's more movement, more change, less identification, less fixedness in this idea that you are just this type of person with this particular life that can't really change. So yeah, this is very much a continuum. And then we can, if I can move I can't quite see this myself, participant enabled captioning. Sorry, I need to close that. I can't, okay, now I can read the whole thing. So yeah, this is a way of looking at we've got the other 5 processes if we're all looking at in terms plotted across these different kind of self situations. So of course, the most contracted would be more what I've called a traumatized self, or self as traumatized, where you're most frozen. Yeah, for example, in the openness, we can even look at trauma symptomatology of fight or flight kind of responses. So frozen is a kind of, yeah, one kind of trauma response. Inactivity, giving up on terms of committed action. terms of how present you are, you're probably dissociating very strongly when you're traumatized. In terms of valuing, you're not probably not thinking, you might not be thinking about expanding your life in that moment. You're probably just thinking, I just need this horrible situation to stop. So we can kind of characterize different behavioral patterns at all these different levels. And of course, these are just examples. They're not, I like to emphasize, they're not definitive, like if your self is processed, then you have to be thinking this. Of course, we're all unique um, unique human beings. Also, we also have parts as well. So you might be in touch with a more compassionate. Here we have compassionate adults. I'm aware of what I'm doing and I know what's important to me and I value kindness. You could be in touch with a part like that, but simultaneously, you might also notice you're having a thought that comes from a fearful child, the feeling needy. You could have the neediness and you could be compassionate towards your own neediness. So that's where this starts to become parts work. And so that's why one of the reasons I think that internal family systems has become so rapidly, so incredibly popular, because I think it provides a simple, almost shortcut to applying a lot of these principles. And it's about a multiplicity of selves, which people seem to be able to connect with the idea very easily. So, yeah, I thought we could do again to get a little bit experiential. Um, Yeah, this is a bit of an experiment, but I think it's going to be fun to try it because I think it's something we could try and do this all together rather than going into pair work. So you don't have to do this, but some of you, I'm hoping some of you will be willing. So this little exercise I'm inviting you to do is you could actually see what it's like to move through these different cells. So you can just choose any column that speaks to you, or you can take a circuitous route. Um, so I'm going to ask you to actually kind of, in a way, intentionally connect with these statements. Almost imagine you're acting them out. Of course, maybe you're in a nice, compassionate place now, or maybe you had a bad, difficult week and you're feeling a bit kind of critical. It's nice to acknowledge we might actually be in, somewhere well, I guess we all are somewhere on the scale. Um, so yeah, if I was going to do this, if I do this, I could just choose one of these, or of course you can choose your own. You can choose your own wording for when you feel a bit frozen or stuck or fearful as a child or critical, or when you're becoming a bit more open and compassionate. And yeah, you don't feel like you have to go all the way to the top. In a way, these higher states, they're less common and might be less obvious to you what it's like. But also some of you here may have had many expanded states of consciousness where these kind of, or if, for example, all is love, if you quite, I quite like that when I'm not feeling like I'm in a place of self as unity right now, but I can connect with the idea that all is love. Got some resonance with that maybe. Although actually I noticed another part of me going really thinking of when all isn't love. So yeah, notice these different parts of you. So yeah, perhaps we could more or less have a go at doing this together. We can all do it in our own uh, pace, but we can literally spend like 1 minute on this. And then we can, if any of you wish to share something of what your experience was, or whatever your experience was, that could be an interesting way of just connecting with this spectrum of selves. So I'm just going to try and I feel like I can connect with this one. I think I'm going to start with Frozen. It's not how I really feel right now. Fortunately, I'm not feeling traumatized right now, but I have felt that way. And if I tune into that, I can kind of connect with that kind of fearful, frozen state and kind of feel into that. This is a bit like acting, but actors, of course, draw from their real life experience, don't they? So it's not like you're just inauthentically making something up. We all have had a lot of these experiences. So I think I'm going to start here and I'm just going to gradually move up. And I invite you to do the same. So we can just spend like a couple of minutes on this. So I can just imagine I'm frozen. I can't bear to feel. Yeah, I can really connect with times I felt that way. I might stay in this one. I'm at war with these feelings. Yeah, it's a little harder, but yeah, and maybe I can connect with this one a bit better actually. Demanding or inactively hoping to be saved. Yeah, I think some of my child memories can be a bit like that. Then this one's easier to connect to. This is probably one I'm more closer to more of the time. We all have our inner critic, don't we? Don't get upset again. It's kind of the rules we tell ourselves to follow. Or I'm no good, I'm pathetic. Yeah, I've definitely told myself that. But already, even just shifting here, I'm feeling a bit more empowered because this is more empowered than feeling completely frozen. But then I'm going to move into this more compassionate self. I value kindness. Yeah, I really do value kindness. I find that one really easy to connect with. Um, and I do already, just connecting with that one, I do feel a bit more expanded, more compassionate, more relaxed, even as part of my experience. I'm getting maybe a bit more meta here, perhaps. I can choose independently of my old patterns. Yeah, if I tune into that one, if I feel into that one, yeah, I feel more empowered. Like I can make really good choices in spite of difficult feelings. Let's jump to this one randomly. Feeling what is important moment to moment. Yeah, that feels good too. Yeah, I seem to be gravitating towards this one. All is love. So yeah, in expanded states of consciousness, you often can feel very inspired. And yeah, people often refer to these platitudes that you've seen written on a postcard somewhere, but they seem to make a lot of direct sense to your experience. People often report. Um, but yeah, um, so another favorite of mine, and actually even I've done a lot of, I collected a huge amount of data through running 5 or 6 retreats where everybody was interviewed about what they found was helpful. And people often mentioned this exercise, which I like to think of as a combination of cognitive diffusion, so that's seeing thoughts just as thoughts rather than seeing thoughts as reality, being aware that thinking is thinking, and also perspective shifting or perspective taking. So if you can combine both those processes, both those experiences into one really simple exercise, that does seem to people were very found that very helpful. So I think of it like a little shifting. It's like again, it's kind of perspective shifting or it's movement, it's flexibility. It's a way of encouraging flexibility through these different selves. So on a case study that I'm going to show you, I think there's an example of, it's very common, especially as the big peak experience of great inspiration. Very often people feel very inspired after a psychedelic retreat. Of course, after a couple of weeks, that might start to fade. Or another way we understand it in terms of this spectrum of selves model is, of course, the more childlike, the more rigid, more avoidant selves start to reappear and go, hang on, maybe everything isn't so great. Or an old thought like, oh, I thought I was cured by the psychedelic ceremony, but now I'm feeling insecure again. I'm broken. I'm not good enough. These old classic thoughts like I'm not good enough can reemerge, say, 2 weeks later. If you can catch them in those moments with exercises like this, then people often did find that helpful. I've got some nice longitudinal graphs of where people's psychological flexibility was fading. But then after doing an exercise like this, it seemed to rehabilitate itself and rise again in a sustainable way. So, would anybody be willing to volunteer to help me demonstrate this one? If you're aware of any thought that you can have about yourself that's perhaps not a very helpful thought, um, then I can show how we can do this both kind of perspective taking and cognitive diffusion at the same time, which I understand to be jumping between two cells. And just that movement, of course, is flexibility. I guess you can't, in the sense that you can't really, ideas that are diametrically opposed or even opposites. This works particularly great when you make a dichotomy out of it, such as good, bad, or um, yeah, a simple dichotomy. So yeah, like when you've got a clear frame in RFT language, we have Louise here with us, our resident RFT expert. if I remember correctly, I believe it's called, it would be a frame of, um, I forget the precise term for it. You can say Louise if you like, but it's when you've got a particular frame where they are complete opposite, a frame of opposition, that's it, isn't it called the frame of opposition? You've got two totally opposite concepts. So these dichotomies, this works great on dichotomies. And often, of course, a compassionate self might have a perspective that's quite the opposite to the traumatized self. But anyway, um, would anybody be willing to have me demonstrate this one with you?
I'll do it if you want. Nobody else
Okay.
will.
Thank you so much, Charles,
Sure, no
for
worries.
volunteering. So, are you aware of any unhelpful thoughts about your self-concept that have emerged?
Sure, I'll give you a classic. Something's wrong with me.
Okay, thank you. So, well done. You've noticed the thought there's something wrong with you that can show up sometimes. So if we see that as a more, yeah, how old is that thought? Is that like, does it feel like a critical thought or a child, like a really old from early childhood thought? How old
Oh
is
yeah,
that?
that's really yeah, it's really old. It's maybe a little over 60 years old.
Okay, so that sounds like that would be a child one, maybe.
Mhm.
Okay. And a more compassionate, expanded sense of self when you've been more aware of
Sure, sure.
the value. What perspective might your compassionate self have?
I'm whole, complete, aware.
Your whole complete aware. Okay. So I'm going to do a little two-part exercise of just contemplating and even experiencing these two perspectives. Okay.
Mhm.
So first of all, I'd like you to just imagine. So you don't have to believe it or anything. It's just imagine the reality just for a split second, as though you're an actor, maybe, that there's something wrong with you.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, you can just nod your head when that you connected with that perspective.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Imagine that you're complete and whole. Was that your word? What's your full wording, your compassionate selves wording on that?
Complete, whole, aware.
Complete, whole, aware, that's it. Yeah. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware. Just let me know when you've got that one.
Mhm.
Thank you. Imagine that there's something wrong with you. So now we're just going to keep flowing, but toggling between the two and see what that's like. Thank you. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware.
Mhm.
Thank you. Imagine that there's something wrong with you. Thank you. Imagine that you're complete, whole, and aware.
Mhm.
Okay, so I just generally keep doing this as long as the person's engaged. Quite often
Mhm.
you will actually experience that it's a bit like you can see the diffusion happening in that the person quite often it'll take them longer and longer to get the more self-defeating negative one and a little bit easier to connect with, yeah, a different perspective. And of course, from an ACT point of view, we don't want to have the agenda of just trying to make certain thoughts go away necessarily. But yeah, before I say any more, I'd like to ask you, Charles, what was your experience of trying that out?
Well, for one thing, I really enjoyed it. I get such a distinct felt sense around each of those poles. It's so distinctly different for me in coming to whole, complete aware. I feel this brightness and an uplifting, throughout the tissues. And then the shame-based one, something's wrong with me. I feel this tightening and this withdrawal, and I associate with such a network of negative behaviors. And the recent work I've been doing around these and finding other ways of being. So for me, it just has this felt sense to it. That's like a roadmap. I like that exercise. It took me a while to understand what you were pointing at when you first introduced this, I think, when we were in some of the other retreats, but for me, it is starting to make sense. So thank you for letting me volunteer.
Yes, thank you so much for volunteering. Yeah. Another way of understanding, if you think of these as concentric circles, I think it's very self as context as well, in the sense that if you repetitively experience both, then of course maybe you're already kind of almost suggests you experientially move into the next one, because you're kind of, some part of you is containing both of these, which could be the next self. So yeah, there we have something you can continue to explore. We are kind of running out of time, so I just wanted to tell you, yeah, if you are curious to explore this in more detail, have a look. Yeah, we have this 2 events coming up, which are a way to experience it. There is the training that we do in Spain, this beautiful venue. That's the actual sea view of where we do it. We do 2 days online just to get through some technical stuff on doing the trauma work. I think trauma work, of course, is an important part of this. And then we do 5 days together where we get to really experience all these processes. Of course, and we actually run a retreat based on all of this in the Netherlands, which is in October. I just wanted to mention, and yeah, there's the web psycheflex.co.uk if you're curious to know more about that. And yeah, I might leave you with this visual summary. This is also in the Spectrum of Selves paper. Mushrooms almost flowing out, touching different domains of your life. It's kind of how I envisage it.